2, 3, testing.
This is a good place to start.
I think this is a really good place to start.
Outside the Welsh Books Council. And if the world did come to an end, Adam, this is where you'd come
Yeah.
and have a look at the books.
Well, I don't think they're there anymore, to be honest.
Ah,
I think they're in the Glanarafon Industrial Estate branch.
Oh.
I don't know what's going on
this
with
is
this.
symbolic. Castell Brychan, this place is called. Who's Brychan?
Don't know.
You say this is it is a castle. It's got a little sort of
But it was
turret.
It was Jesus. Is it Jesus?
Did Jesus live here?
No.
He lived in Jerusalem.
This was a
Oh, he was it a nunnery?
This was a convent.
Oh, convent. Nunnery.
Originally, yeah. I think a nunnery a place where nuns go to live when they've retired, and a convent is a place where they kind of study their nunnery.
Nunnery. You go to a nunnery, and then they all leave it till
Okay,
there's none left.
How are we going to? How should we introduce this, though?
Well, yeah, I was going to say,
shall I
Adam, why don't you introduce this
Okay.
into what your idea was?
Okay. So this really is I don't really want to call it a podcast, because a podcast sounds like something that's created for the world, and I think we're just doing it.
Is this an artifact? Is it a
we're
historical document?
We're creating an artifact, something that maybe your kids would listen to in 40 years' time.
Well, if there was a global epidemic and 5 billion people died, which links in with what we're going to talk about.
Beautifully, yeah. I do have some notes. So the idea of this really is that Brian and I have known each other for well over 30 years, but we haven't really seen each other for 30 years.
No.
In a funny sort of a way, a pandemic brought me back to Aberystwyth, where Brian and I met 30 odd years ago.
Yeah.
And soon afterwards, probably about a year afterwards, I moved to London, which was a big mistake, but it kind of pushed me out of Wales for quite a long time.
We came to visit you in London.
You did, yeah. But then somewhere along the line, probably from moving and mobile phones and things like that, we kind of lost touch. And then in 2020, it was 2020 I think, it was the end of 2020, I moved back to Aberystwyth, and not long after that, I was going to Tesco Express, and outside Tesco Express I heard this voice. And I knew that Brian was in Aberystwyth, but I hadn't seen you, and I thought I'd bump into you at some point. Don't know, we were still in COVID. So socially distanced, I walked over to him and stood there, but he was in a deep conversation with somebody, and so I was just hovering like some kind of madman. And Brian noticed me, and I was obviously making him a little bit nervous, and he said, "I'm sorry, can I help you?" And I said, "Brian Evans?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "It's Adam." And he went, "Oh my God." And we had this sort of conversation.
Yeah.
Socially distant. Swapped telephone numbers, made arrangements to meet up, and then,
the rest is history.
That's my perception of it.
And that's what's brought us here. Well, I was going to say, it was Tesco Express, top of North Parade. I was talking to somebody from work called Michelle, and you sort of crept up. You had like a little hat on, that's why I didn't recognise you, and you sort of crept up. And just like, the few seconds, I just thought, can I help this gentleman? And then it was you.
He looks a bit disturbed.
Well, crept up, didn't he? I was mid-conversation.
Sidled in.
And as you said, the rest is history, which again ties back into the film we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
It's all about history and the future. It
is all about the past and the future, and us moving forward through. And
well, everything's about that, I suppose.
Well, it is, yeah. I work as a fine artist, and a lot of my work is about proto-technologies, about old machinery, technologies like bookmaking and things like that. But I never want to call it nostalgia. I'm not interested in nostalgia. It's not about wanting to go back in time. What it is, it's about celebrating technologies that we neglect, reusing technologies that we neglect. I have this new technology, which is these wireless microphones, and these amazing recorders, and so I thought this would be a great opportunity to have a conversation.
Give it a go.
And
And
so we're talking about the thing that's going to tie it all together is Terry Gilliam's 12 Monkeys.
Well, you said to me, oh, let's just think of a film.
I did, yes.
Sort of kick it off. And he said something like from the 90s
Mm.
and not too cult, not too well known, but not completely.
Well, do you know why I said that?
Why did you say that?
I said that because the day before I'd watched Pulp Fiction, which I had only really seen a couple of times, and I've got a very strange relationship with Tarantino and his films. And I remember when Reservoir Dogs came out and Pulp Fiction, and how they were these great cult things and everybody loved them, and I was just left a little bit unexcited by it. And it's funny because Tarantino is a sort of a contemporary of mine in age. We have very much the same sort of pop culture references, I suppose. Maybe I was envious.
So funnily enough, Adam, I think you were there. I was there. The British premiere of Reservoir Dogs was in Commodore Cinema.
I remember that, yeah.
Aberystwyth Film Festival.
Yes.
And I think I've been to Sundance and things, but I honestly think that was one of the first times it was shown in Britain.
Well, in fact,
Was in the Commodore in Aberystwyth.
and Seymour Cassell, who plays the driver.
I don't think Seymour
No,
Cassell
no.
was in.
No. Seymour Cassell. No, I'm getting mixed up. Okay,
He was in the soup.
Seymour Cassell was the driver in
Indecent Proposal.
Indecent Proposal. He was the driver.
Maybe
Maybe I got that wrong.
He is, Adam.
Yeah.
Why I like him is he's in at least 2 Wes Anderson films.
Oh, right.
He is the father, who's a barber in Rushmore, and he's also the elevator guy in the Royal Tenenbaums.
Oh, wow.
And he's the elevator guy in the hotel where Gene Hackman, aka Royal Tenenbaum, is living. And he came to Aber, didn't he? As part of the same
He came to
festival.
Aber because
Was it that year though?
I don't know. Maybe I'm mixing things up. Terry Gilliam.
Terry Gilliam is now 80.
I find him a bit disappointing, but I think, is it just 80-year-olds?
Yeah, he's
saying
having a bit. He has rants about everything now, really, doesn't he?
Well, he did this kind of fairly crude trans joke, which was lifted from The Life of Brian, book me an address and call me Loretta.
Oh yeah.
But
I just think he knows. He's admitted, because he did an interview about 12 Monkeys fairly recently, and he sort of knows that he's not going to make any big Hollywood blockbuster films anymore. And I think he knows the spotlight's a bit off him now. So I just think I don't know if he's trying to, but he's a bit controversial, isn't he, into the stuff he says and doesn't care. And
Can you smell that?
no, what's that?
Can you smell this autumnal?
Oh yeah,
Like, it's so nice.
yeah, it's a lovely time of year.
It's kind of it smells kind of
Transitional.
mushroomy. 12 Monkeys starts with a black screen with kind of computerized graphics from the day.
It was released in 1996.
96.
I was sometimes you remember where you were.
Yeah.
I was living in Brisbane,
Oh, right. Oh.
in Australia. This is true now. Posters started coming up. The 12 Monkeys posters started popping up everywhere
Oh, really?
around the city. It's probably part of the marketing.
Yeah. I
What's
think
this?
it
This
was.
looks interesting. 12 Monkeys, the army of the 12 Monkeys.
Well, I remember certainly seeing it in the press in Empire magazine.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was part of their campaign, and that is actually illustrated in the hamster factor.
Because, this was before the internet. Well, pretty much. It was pretty much before mobile phones or anything.
Yeah.
So it was more analog. These started appearing all around the city.
Interestingly, if you think about Terry Gilliam's art direction in both Brazil and 12 Monkeys, there's this kind of techno digital analog.
It's like Art Deco,
Yeah, it's
steampunk.
exactly. It's like an imagining of technology evolving in a kind of evolutionary way.
It sort of becomes quite
does
archaic.
this sort of leap from one to the other, and so there's still remnants.
Yeah, it's all pistons and steam and
cathode ray tubes and
yeah,
magnifying screens.
brass. Yeah, that was very much, that was like Brazil as well, wasn't it?
5 billion people will die from a deadly virus in 1997. The survivors will abandon the surface of the planet. Once again, the animals will rule the world. Excerpts from an interview with clinically diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. April 12th, 1990, Baltimore County Hospital.
So it came out in 96, but you know, it's about so many things that are still relevant today, isn't it, Adam? It's about conspiracies and the downfall of society, and it's about homelessness, it's about mental health, and of course the big thing which ties it into, you know, what we know today is, of course, you know, it's about a global pandemic. And you know, how relevant is that? Because I think that was the big thing, one of the big things about COVID. Everyone says like we're living in a film, post-apocalyptic. People were pulling together and plucky, and we didn't know what was coming, what the threat actually was.
We really did not know what was coming.
After watching films like 12 Monkeys, you know, before it actually arrived, and do you remember for weeks before, people were building field hospitals and massive sort of mortuaries and things. You know, no one quite knew until it actually arrived, you know, how bad it was going to be, whether it was going to be, it was awful what happened. You know, what, like 1 million people have died of COVID. But, you know, we didn't know if it was going to be 5 billion, did we?
No.
But, you know, we're talking about films and stuff. And you're into films and I'm into films and you're a filmmaker. You know, we were living in a film, weren't we? We were living in a film. You know,
but,
we were living in an outbreak. But honestly, I used to walk down, you know, the hour you got to go for a walk every day. I'd walk down Penglice Hill with my kids. And it was like 28 days later, or I Am Legend, you know, you just walk down, there'd be like wildlife everywhere, and you'd walk down the middle of Penglice Hill, and you know, obviously you wouldn't see one car, and you know, all the vegetation was overgrowing, and it was just like, you think, oh, I've seen this so many times in films, and we're actually a little bit living through it.
Well, actually, wasn't it in, where was it that in Wales that the mountain goats came down into the town? I didn't go out at all. Like, for the months that we were in the first lockdown, I did exercise inside, which I think, weirdly, is the only documentation that I did of the pandemic, was a silly couple of videos of me exercising inside. And were your kids with you?
Well, no. Actually, it was the Tory government at the time. And the first thing my ex-wife and I both thought about is, where do the kids stay? There was something that said, if the kids lived with mum and dad 50% of the time, that could carry on. Actually, I had this horrible idea that lockdown, you know, from the minute lockdown started, whoever the kids were with would stay with that person until it finished. And we didn't know if that was going to be months or years or whatever. There was like a law that got round that, which was good.
Right.
But yeah, I was saying, I mean, I kept imagining what it was like because you were in the city. But, you know, obviously we were in Aberystwyth, so it was weird. But, you know, you had the prom, you had the sea, you had the green, do you know?
Yeah.
You could get out into nature. So I can't imagine what it would have been like to sort of do it.
Well, the city was literally dead. I mean, it literally was like the opening scene where Jim Cole gets sent out with his condom suit and his big flashlight to go onto the surface. We first meet him in this cage. He's sent out on a voluntary mission that he doesn't think he'll necessarily come back from. And then we see, is it Philadelphia?
It's Philadelphia, I think, yeah.
So we see Philadelphia, it's been taken over by animals. The surface of the planet is not habitable because of the virus. He's on a mission to...
He goes to the store and he gets a spider, doesn't he? And he gets a cockroach.
Yeah.
But then again, we don't know, do we? We don't know whether the bug, the virus is still going. I mean, the animals are all flourishing, aren't they?
Yeah, and then he brings it all back and he gets there, and there's the scrubbing scene, which gets mirrored again, doesn't it, later on?
Later on in the facility he's put in the 90s. So
the art direction, I think, is amazing. I think part of it was to do with money. They didn't have a huge amount of money. And rather than building these massive sets, they found these old turbine stations, like power stations that had been decommissioned. And so they went and shot in those turbine stations.
Anyway, it's very Terry Gilliam, isn't it?
Very
all
Terry
fans
Gilliam.
And very industrial. It looks amazing in the film.
It did look amazing. And I've always loved Terry Gilliam's use of wide lenses. he's always used like at least a 20 or 21 millimeter lens, which gives this really wide angle effect. But in this, there's a lot of third man kind of angling going on. Everything's sloping a bit. Everything's a little bit uncomfortably composed. So roughly around that time that the film came out, I was working on a film. I was the camera operator on a short film. It was Seamus Heaney's nephew was the director. He worked in the film industry. He was an editor. He somehow got a copy of the film on VHS before it even came out in the UK.
Of the 12 Monkeys?
12 Monkeys. So that's how I saw it. He lent me the film, and actually I did do another copy of it actually on VHS. So that's the first time I saw it.
So one of the big themes in it is that it's a global pandemic, and we can talk about that, and you know we know a bit about that. But then the other big thing about 12 Monkeys is it's about time travel.
Yeah.
And I've been
Temporal Interpolated.
Well, I've been looking into it, and obviously there's different types of time travel films, aren't there?
Yes.
There's one where you've got to put something right.
Yeah.
Okay, so a good example of that is the Terminator, where you've got to stop something happening or stop someone.
Yeah.
Someone's actually literally trying to change time, yeah?
Yeah.
Or Back to the Future.
Yeah.
So that's one type. I think there's 3 types. And then there's another one where somebody goes back in time and steps on a cockroach and then changes history.
What's that?
And they go back. Well, no, there's...
Oh, you mean...
There's something small.
Oh, I see. Okay.
The butterfly effect. That's
the
another
butterfly,
type of...
the butterfly effect, yeah.
I actually think there's a film called The Butterfly Effect. And that's another type of time travel film. And of course, there's 12 Monkeys, where you can go backwards and forwards in time, do whatever you want, and it doesn't change anything.
There's a theory about the film, which is Baudrillard's simulacra and simulation, where there's a thought that it's actually a simulation, that he's being sent into a simulation, not into a reality of time travel. But I don't like that. I don't like that.
I don't agree with that at all.
I don't.
I think that's more to do with the Matrix. I know Baudelaire was quoted a lot when the Matrix came out, but simulations. I do think he does go through. I think it's obvious he does go through time because he witnesses the start of the Yeah, he gets shot in the war, doesn't he?
Yeah.
What's interesting is it's a film where, if you speak to people about the film, sometimes they sort of say, "Oh yeah, Bruce Willis has got to sort of go backwards and forwards and sort of stop it happening." But I don't think that's ever the story.
No, it's always about getting information.
Yeah, and this is what's interesting about it. And it's going to tie into something I'm going to say later on, and something that's happening in a week's time. You know, they're not trying to stop it, are they? They're trying to get a cure for the future, but they don't mind it actually happening. You know, they don't try and stop it. Oh, so it's not Bruce Willis.
They know they're not going to change anything.
No.
And in fact, like the butterfly effect doesn't even come into it, does it? It's not even mentioned.
No. Lots of different things happen each time he goes, and it doesn't make any difference at all.
Yeah, there's no... Whereas like something like Back to the Future, it's all about space-time continuum.
Yeah.
And
you weren't born.
Yeah. And like disappearing off the photograph and blah, blah, blah. It's interesting you say about there not being any effect by what he's done, or... I'd never really thought about that.
You know, it's a time travel film where, he's going to travel forward and backwards in time. And it doesn't... You know, it's all on rails. It gets to that end. That was always going to happen. A lot of films, it's all about the time travel. And this isn't really about the time travel, because time travel doesn't make any difference in the end.
What's the French film that it's based on?
La Jetée.
Le Jetée. A man visualising his own death in the future.
Well, I wasn't going to sell a lot of tickets, was it?
It wasn't going to sell a lot of tickets.
So they put a bit of a thriller, dystopian thriller.
It did really well as well in the box office.
Yeah, it did. And... You know, it was interesting because I saw these posters up around Brisbane, but with nothing, no dates, didn't say what it was about really. And then a couple of weeks before, you'd get the film poster, and you had Bruce Willis, and you had Brad Pitt then, who was massively hot because the same summer Seven had come out, David Fincher's Seven, and he was, that was
huge.
phenomenal. It was a phenomenal success. So Brad Pitt, who was actually nominated for a Best Supporting Actor Oscar for his role in 12 Monkeys.
Well, it's a fantastic performance. He wears these contact lenses that knock his eyes out, doesn't he? I mean,
I just wondered if he was
kilter.
acting, and like making his eyes go cross-eyed. I thought it was cross-eyed acting.
No, they're brown contacts, and one's been put in at a slight angle.
Yeah.
But he...
But that's a bit bad, though. Is that a bit bad that sort of signifies some sort of mental disorder?
Well, it used
to
always be the case, didn't it, that disability was used as some kind... the bad guy was always disabled. If you think about, the bad Nazi in...
Dr. Strangelove.
Indiana Jones. And,
hang
on, which one is it? The first one?
Well, there's Nazis in quite a few of them.
And
actually, Adam, tell me, where have you seen that trick used recently in a film where the guy, he was nominated for an Oscar, and he used a contact lens as well that made his eye go a bit ski-whiff? Holdovers.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
And that's how they did
and
the
it was
trick.
the same thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was the same in the
It wasn't
sense...
CGI, it was just a contact lens.
And we were going, are his eyes really look like that? And I remember looking at Sideways.
Yeah, Paul Giamatti.
But he was also in Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, he's been in tons of stuff.
Yeah.
He's really good. He's a really good actor. So we've said it's very current, isn't it? It's very timely, the themes of 12 Monkeys. And then we've said it's a time travel film where the time travel doesn't really have any impact, and people think it's about saving the world, and it's not. It's about saving a group of sort of the very richest people, isn't it? And I thought then, what does that remind me of? What does that remind everyone of? The big thing about this film was, towards the end, Bruce Willis, James Cole, just sort of, he almost gives up, and he just tries to enjoy the moment, yeah? He jumps in a river, he listens to the music, he loves 20th century music, he sticks his head out the window, doesn't he, and just enjoys the feel of the wind in his hair. And it's almost as if, he's given up, and I just thought, oh crikey, like in less than a week's time, it's the election,
yes.
isn't it? It's the US election.
Yes.
And I thought, what's strange is, they're all accepting that the apocalypse has happened in 12 Monkeys. No one's trying to do anything to change it.
Yeah.
And, that's about how the world is at the moment, isn't it? I think a lot of people have just accepted that Donald's going to get back in. And they're sort of preparing for afterwards rather than trying to stop him getting back in. This is a historical artefact that we're talking about now, because in a couple of days' time, by the time this comes out or is on YouTube or anyone hears it, or we listen to it again, we'll know.
We'll know.
But we don't know at the moment.
We don't know.
So just to say...
It's like Schrodinger's cat.
Everyone, it's absolutely neck and neck, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I know the Republicans are very confident, but they would be, wouldn't they? That's part of their trick. That's part of their trick.
Yeah.
And the Democrats, always the Democrats are the nervous people. But I'm surprised the Democrats aren't pushing it more. It's almost like they're sleepwalking into it. I don't know. Kamala Harris is appearing in different places. And this is a bit how it is in 12 Monkeys. They sort of sleepwalk their way into an apocalypse.
Yeah.
That's the link I saw.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And it's like, it's about living your life. And James Cole lives his life preceding an apocalypse he knows is coming. And that's how I feel sometimes about...
But even if you look at the way that Johnson dealt with the very beginning of the COVID pandemic, there was no executive decision to say we're on the edge of a precipice here. It was just pretending that everything was fine, everything was going to be fine, business as usual, the pubs will stay open. It was like a slow car crash, wasn't it, in a way? Because you could see at that point what was going on in Italy.
Yeah, well that's a bit like time travel, because people were looking at Italy and they were looking to the future, weren't they? Because they could see what was happening there was going to come and happen to us. So that's...
Yeah, because a very similar sized country, very similar kind of health system. Well, not dissimilar.
But the other thing is, this is dystopian, this is apocalyptic, okay? But just think, you're getting up in 1996 and the Cold War was over, Berlin Wall had fallen. Things were, these people said it was the death of history, I think it was called, wasn't it? Like, there was no more history, everything was good now. And look where we are now. You get up every morning. I think the term is existential threats, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's climate.
Yeah.
It's global conflict.
Yeah.
Ukraine, Gaza. It's AI.
Yeah.
And then, what you add to that now is the possibility of Donald Trump getting the presidency next week. Yeah, and like no one's doing, it doesn't seem like people aren't that bothered, and that's the same sort of thing that happens in 12 Monkeys, I think. They sort of sleepwalk into it, really.
Yeah.
Some people know what's going to happen, and they can't stop it. They don't really try very hard either.
Jeffrey Boynes, is it Jeffrey Boynes? The
Brad Pitt character,
character. He's the, we see him as the protagonist, and there's that point where Jim Cole believes that he gave the idea to Jeffrey about releasing a toxin or changing the world, and he's horrified. He's horrified by that.
But it's clever, Adam, in that a lot of what he thinks happening isn't really happening. People were watching it, expecting Bruce Willis to save the world and stop it happening.
Yeah, because that's his pedigree, isn't it?
Yeah. So there's a subversion. The other thing is, you spend most of the film thinking it's Brad Pitt and the army of 12 monkeys, and a lot of the focus is on them, isn't it?
Yeah.
And all they do is release some zoo animals.
Yeah.
So really, it's fooled the viewer on a couple of times, hasn't it? Really,
Yeah.
Or subverted your expectations. So it's quite clever like that. But then again, some people might say, well, I spent most of my time focusing on this and this and this, and it was a red herring.
Well, it's not done in a tricksy way, though, is it?
No, but I suppose what it was doing was, as you said, subverting the viewer's expectations about how a film like that turns out. Because normally, it is the second lead, isn't it? It is Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
And they do save the world. And none of that happens. And it all starts all over again, doesn't it? Because the young James Cole witnesses it all happening in the airport. That's another thing I think it's about. It's about perception. There's lots of things on screens. There's how people view it. Oh, Brad Pitt is the villain. Oh, I know this, the world's going to get changed. They go to the cinema. There's loads of TV screens, aren't there, in the future?
Yeah. Well, Vertigo plays a huge role in this.
Vertigo plays
film.
a big role in it.
Even to the extent that when Dr. Rayleigh goes to get the tickets, she gives the name Judy, which is the name of the Kim Novak character, the replacement Madeleine in Vertigo.
So I didn't come up with this, but I think I read it somewhere. I don't know, but again, they go and see a film, and this ties in with the themes of 12 Monkeys, in that the film is, you can't change film, can you?
No, that's a really good point, yeah.
But
it's
what does change
linear.
Is Adam watching Vertigo at 20, Adam watching Vertigo at 40 and 60. There's your time travel.
Yes.
But actually, Vertigo isn't going to change, but you change. So I don't know, that's probably tied in somehow.
And we're also talking about the Jim Cole character having actually lived through these times twice, when he's talking about the boy in the mine. He's visualising the same time frame, both as an older man and as a young boy.
But there you see, in that one, we think we know what's going on. We think that we know the boy is down the mine shaft and he's in the barn. So again,
it's a prank.
It subverts our expectations. So it's always doing that to the viewer, which is clever, which is really good.
Actually, I have got a bit of a surprise for you. Because, we're talking about time and the way time works and time travel, but I can sort of take you back in time now.
Why? He says nervously.
It's just something I've got in my bag that will take us back in time. In here, I have another recording device.
Got it.
So I've just taken out of my bag a cassette recorder.
Wow.
So we're going to go back in time because the technology is going to change in this little sequence.
Okay, so you're going to record us on a cassette recorder.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now we're on cassette.
We're on cassette.
Going back in time.
This is a very different technology.
You see, cassette was from the 80s, wasn't it, really? 70s, 80s?
Well, cassette. The actual cassette was introduced in 1963, I believe. It was a Dutch invention, the cassette. And, my God, the cultural icons that have been produced on cassette is pretty phenomenal, really. You know, from that amazing Kubrick interview that's all over YouTube, the internet. You know, 1966, wonderful interview with Kubrick, probably the best recorded interview that was recorded for the New York Times, I think. And anyway, so we're on the same technology.
I always think of the 80s being in school and, you know, making mixtapes for people if you really liked someone, or for your friends. Or let's say, you know, someone you liked and you spend like hours compiling like a mixtape for them and like, you know, just the inserts and everything.
Curation. It's curation,
yeah,
isn't it?
You know, you'd get different types of, I don't know if it made any difference at all, but you could get different types of cassette that, you know, sounded better or whatever, you know, TDK or Maxell or whatever. And it was just, cassettes were massive, weren't they?
Well, there's a point in 12 Monkeys, it's not cassette, but when they find the headquarters of the army of the 12 Monkeys and Jim Cole and Dr. Rayleigh bursting through the door, and there are animal sounds, there's roaring lions and tigers and birds, and Jim Cole's terrified and she's saying, "It's a tape." This is the weirdest place, this student village.
It's a bit sort of mid-witch cuckoos, isn't it? This is like something from a film.
It is.
Expecting people to come running out of the house and chase us, you know?
But it's also that it accommodates such a wide variety of people, because in the summer the Hasidic Jews stay here.
And
the scooter rally, the sort of right-wing scooter rally people stay here.
But this ties into what
Not
we're
all
talking
right,
about, because this is what it was like. So, you know, people listening now can't see it, but it's just absolutely desolate. It's just like tons and tons of houses. We're walking down the middle of the road and there's no one around.
Okay, well, that was our little tape experiment. We can come back to normal resume.
Okay, so the next time you hear our voice, we'll be back in the 21st century. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
It's good.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of like a nice little
I like that.
interlude.
This is like, you'd have enjoyed, well, I think I remember watching it. I remember the opening credits were terrifying. In the 70s, BBC One, Survivors.
Survivors,
And
I
they
loved
did
Survivors.
Terry Nation, who invented the Daleks.
Yeah.
And they did like a remake, which was just rubbish.
Yeah, it was
wasn't
rubbish.
Like, yeah. I think I remember there was some guy dressed up like a scientist and he dropped, didn't he? Like dropped a beaker or like a test tube. And then there was like footage of like planes taking off.
Probably February 2019. I bought the box set in HMV of Survivors.
Before you knew about the upcoming pandemic.
Before I knew about the upcoming pandemic. And I watched the whole thing because I remember that when I was a kid. And I loved it. The whole family loved it. Now, you need to watch it because it is fantastic television. The writing is so good. Like, there are actually scenes where people are sat around a table, and this one scene for 20 minutes in a farmhouse where they're talking about rebuilding a society from the ground up. Like, where in television would you get that today? I mean, that's just amazing.
But do you agree, you know, there's these dystopian programs now, but what was interesting in what you were just saying, the idea was, you know, the world had ended, whatever, but it's like in these zombie films or, you know, 12 Monkeys. In the end, it's not the virus or the zombies that are dangerous. The dangerous is the people, isn't it?
Well, you know, one of the terrible things I have to say about Survivors was how classist it is.
Yeah,
and
wow.
In fact, all the goodies speak like this. They're all very, very, very posh indeed. And all the baddies, well, in fact, the worst baddie of them all, the rapist, where they have to make a decision what to do with him. And there is an execution, and I think he executes himself. I can't really remember it. Is a Welshman.
Oh.
It's that. I can't remember the actor's name. He's a fantastic portrayal, but you know, everybody with a kind of regional accent are the baddies, which is horrible, but typical of the time. Very BBC, but great writing. You know, Terry Nation did a fantastic job. I'm not sure if he wrote the whole thing or if he was part of the team.
I think he was just the creator, wasn't he? How did it end then?
Well, it ended with switching back on the grid, the electrical grid. So they make their way up to Scotland and they switch on a hydroelectric power station.
The lights come back on.
So the lights come back on and all the way, and then they're rebuilding the network all the way down to England from Scotland. And there are people that are trying to stop them and sabotage the power station and the electrical lines. People that would say, no, we want a pre-electrical society. You know, the thing that's most important in the whole thing.
What were they? The Luddites? Was it the Luddites didn't like technology?
Yeah, it was the Luddites, wasn't it? Didn't they break up the looms? The thing that was most important was the production of soap, because soap, they obviously didn't have any antibiotics or anything. So cleanliness was literally the thing that saved everybody from tetanus and blood poisoning.
Yeah.
You know, and if you think about kind of penicillin as being, it was discovered in 1928. It didn't come on the market until 1945.
So these, you know, end of the world, people like them, don't they? They like these end of the world narratives.
The reason that these kind of apocalypse movies are so important and so mindful are because you can reinvent yourself after it.
Well, it depends on the apocalypse, because
well, it does.
We lived in the 80s, and you remember Threads, and you know the threat was, you know.
Well, you didn't want to survive that one, did you?
You didn't want to survive. It wasn't that, was it? So films like Mad Max and stuff, when you sort of, we'll go down and get some guns and we'll get a car and living in rural Wales or whatever. But unfortunately, the big apocalypse in the 80s was nuclear war, which was going to be grim. Well, that was just, in the 90s, that was the, it was a global pandemic with science fiction. And, look what happened, 24 years later, became reality.
And it wasn't really much fun.
I suppose, it sounds selfish, doesn't it? I suppose it was about making the best you could of it. And like I said, we were here in Aberystwyth. It didn't reach Aberystwyth for a long, long time. I think it's because of the mountains and, it's difficult to get here. It came to us a lot later on, really. And, I remember it, ironically, the sun was out, it was in May, wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh, this is fabulous. Oof. Hang on, where's that coming from there?
Studio number 1.
So we're in the art centre.
Yep. Down this way?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Helo, shwmae eto, chi'n iawn?
Shwmae. Let's just have a quick look at this ceramics. Show.
So in the world of 12 Monkeys, these would be historical artefacts.
Well, that's another interesting thing, isn't it? Because the one thing that survives everything is ceramics. It's the only thing really that does. Paper doesn't survive. If you look at all the artefacts that there are from
ancient
the dawn
Egypt
of time, the artefacts unaffected by heat.
Did your children like this?
But just very, very fragile.
Easily knocked off the sideboard.
Yeah, but it'll last 2,000 years in the sand.
It'll last 2,000 years in the sand or the jungle.
That crab I'm looking at now, someone snapped his claw off. Gone.
It's funny, I was in Faenza.
That lady there is called Moira, and she's actually in charge of ceramics.
Oh, that's Moira Vincentelli.
Oh, we allowed to use the name. Yes.
Yeah, we can use her name.
Hey, what's happening over there? Students of all nations unite.
Demo.
See, that's a bit 12 Monkeys, isn't it?
It is a bit.
you know,
Go and ask them if they've seen
demonstrations.
12 Monkeys.
They won't know what 12 Monkeys is. It's like nearly 30
Well,
years old.
isn't it? Yeah, but it's a TV show now, isn't it?
But apparently, it's only very loosely based. It started off quite sort of linked, but you know, I think it went on for a couple of seasons, didn't it? So you know, try stringing that out for that long.
Have you seen any of it?
I think I watched a couple of episodes. I think I gave up.
The students united will never be defeated. The students united will never be defeated.
nice.
We've
The
walked into
students
some
united
political
will never
turmoil.
be defeated. People before profits, funding not fees.
Oh wow!
People before profits, funding not fees. What do we do when students are under attack? Stand up, fight back.
So,
What do we do
Adam,
when students
Yeah.
are under attack?
my
Stand
question
up,
is,
fight back.
normally if people are picketing, they're trying to stop people
Why must we?
entering a building or leaving, or they're trying to cause some trouble. But these people are like tucked away.
Well, they're just going for the acoustics. I mean,
Good, but
they're
I
standing
don't
in
know
front of
what
this most amazing.
how that's helping. Or perhaps they're just having a practice. Are they practicing their slogans? That guy's got his sign backwards.
The only real sort of demonstrators, the only people that are really illustrated here in our film 12 Monkeys that we're talking about, they're kind of treated a bit like idiots, aren't they? I mean, I think that Jim Cole, when he makes that phone call to the carpet cleaning firm, which is his portal to the future, he leaves a message saying it's just a bunch of kids, they're just releasing animals, they're not the cause of the pandemic.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, it's funny. That wasn't scripted. We just bumped into those people. But yeah, they are treated like the comedy, really, aren't they? In the film, they're not a proper threat.
No, but you know, I'm a great fan of Demo.
Well, yeah.
You know, I was involved heavily with the Viraj Mendes defence campaign in Manchester, and I used to. There was nothing like walking down a street in Manchester, shrieking at the top of your voice, something you really believe in. That was as close to any kind of sort of therapy I think I ever got. Before I got therapy later on in life, but that's another story. If you think now about how we're all very, very comfortable to say, oh, you know, it's my mental health, and this is something that connects back to the pandemic as well, doesn't it? It's okay. You're not going to end up in a mental institution being hosed down by
Yeah,
a
but
couple
am I
of
right?
heavies.
Am I right? I mean, I didn't go, and you know, I know you didn't either. I wasn't in any mental institutions in the 90s, but was it like that? Because it's played in the film like Bedlam, isn't it? It's
I think
absolute,
I think that was the kind of end of it. I mean, I did have friends who had been in mental institutions.
but not like that portrayed in that film, where
Not
it's
portrayed
brutal,
like that.
You know,
No,
it's
much more
grim,
like a
isn't it?
hospital setting.
It was like dungeon, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And I liked them. I thought the mirroring was quite interesting of the shower. Wasn't he hosed down before he went to the fusion? And then that was mirrored.
No,
back.
he was
the
hosed
other way around?
down when he came back from the surface.
Ah, okay. Yeah, from the surface. That's right.
Yeah.
And then the next time we see him hosed down, he's in the mental institution getting hosed down.
So yeah, and then it was a theme. I think, like I said before, I think the film before was Fisher King, and that was to do with the homeless in New York, wasn't it? And, you know, people who were mentally ill in New York and.
Well, American footballers. I think that if you're our age, place in cinema that you hold up as portrayal of mental illness, it has to be One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Which I think is more mentally brutal with Ratchet, the nurse. You know, she seems like such a brutal character, but it's more of a mental torture, isn't it, than a physical torture.
The one in 12 Monkeys, I suppose it was reflecting where he'd come from, but it was more like prison, really, wasn't it? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it is a historical artefact. It's about 30 years old now, isn't it?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
lots
yeah.
of changed since then. Again, historical artefacts, another big library. A bit like the big
National Library of
buildings
Wales.
they have in. There's lots of these big buildings in Philadelphia in 12 Monkeys. There's like bears prowling around, lions.
Maybe we should go in.
Do you think?
Yeah, let's go in. Let's go and see what they've got on show. Because the opening, the first time we see Dr. Rayleigh is at a talk on a painting, isn't it? Does the camera zooms out?
Yeah, and she
of a
drops
painting?
her phone, isn't she? And she's
Yeah.
sort of,
Is it a pager, pre-phone?
pager. You know, like I said, I saw 12 Monkeys in Australia. It was 96. I came back And I was lining up outside the Commodore to see Independence Day.
Oh, right.
And some guy had like a mobile phone, and it was, you know, it was one of these classic, you know, it was like a brick, you know,
Like a what?
making a big point, like a brick.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But you know, it wasn't. I think that's when people started getting sort of mobile phones, but they were just phones, weren't they? They weren't smartphones. They weren't like a Apple Mac in your pocket.
They were kind of those Nokia-y type
Yeah,
things,
just
weren't
like
they? Or even more basic than that, probably.
just push the buttons, isn't it, and phone someone up, but nothing else.
Yeah.
You know, you talk to that about, you know, to my kids now who are 18 and 21, and they just can't. It's you know, ancient history. They just can't get their heads around it.
About there being
nothing like that.
Or
4 channels on TV.
But can they relate it back to computers? Does it feel more like a computer in your pocket?
It is like a little mini computer, isn't it?
Let's go.
Going this way, or I'm going to go through the main door.
Can we go through the main
Oh,
door?
well, I don't know. Ah, this is visitor's entrance. We'll go this way. See what the main exhibit is, yeah?
Yeah, that would be interesting.
This is very 12 Monkeys, because there's quite a lot of...
We're going in through a revolving door. This is a massive revolving door. It's kind of a disabled revolving door, isn't it, I suppose?
It's the main revolving door here. Exhibitions are this way.
Na'r ffordd i byddwn ni'n meddwl, achos o'ch chi'n meddwl bod rhyw exhibition yn rhywbeth, o'ch chi ar that?
Na, oeddan ni ddim meddwl rhag gweld y
That's a bit 12 Monkeys, sort of.
There's nothing on.
There's nothing on, guys.
There's nothing to see here.
This was where the Canaletto was.
Yeah.
Was this?
Mind you, I like the kind of the meta of seeing things going up. So it looks like they're putting up a new
Lewis.
exhibition. This must be part of the National Library collection, is it?
We're going in there. Have a look at the treasures. We've seen these loads of times.
This is where the alleged Holy Grail is, isn't it? It's in here, isn't it? The one that was at
I don't think so.
at the Hafford.
There's one in the Holy
Christmas
Grail
Island.
was kept here, but it was actually ended up in Lloyd's Bank in town.
What, the Holy Grail?
Yeah, but that was an urban legend. I don't think it was true. I don't know. Indiana
You
Jones.
mean in the vault, not just like on the side?
Well, yeah,
with
not
pens in it.
Yeah, no, like in the vault. It's the Black Book of Carmarthen, yeah. It's like one of the oldest books in Wales. There's some amazing vaults here. Like, I used to come here with the kids. I work in a school, so we came here, bring the kids here, and they take you down there. Literally, they'd open the vaults up, and they're like, you know, when they closed, all the air gets sucked out and stuff. It's like really sort of sci-fi, everything behind the scenes. I remember we went in, and this guy says, "Oh, hold this," and he hands like a book to one of the kids, and he goes, "That's worth £2 million." There's a book in the vault. It's like one of the most expensive books here. It's worth millions, and it's a Birds of the Americas.
Oh, wow.
Like beautiful
Illustration.
hand-painted illustrations of like flamingos and toucans.
Is it a printed book or a handmade book?
No, it's handmade. It's, you know, it's really old.
Wow.
Oh, we had this picture. Oh, you can't quite see it, right? What was famous about this? Apparently, the face of the devil is in
The sleeve.
the elbows, the eye there. You can't see it. There's the mouth there as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So Brian is pointing out a picture of an elderly lady in a Welsh costume, national Welsh costume. Looks like in a court scene.
It's in
Sure.
a chapel called Salem, and we went on a Sunday school trip, and we actually literally visited.
Oh, right.
You know, now they've got Alton Towers and stuff, but then we visited there. It was great. It's obviously stayed with me. Right.
So we're going to squeeze in together.
You go. We'll socially distance, seeing we're talking about global
Go around
epidemics.
again. Just go around again and see if it still picks you up, the radio mic. So Brian is going round the ancient revolving door again.
Right,
Speak.
can you hear me?
Speak.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? You couldn't hear me. I was in.
I don't know. I didn't check. I didn't
I was
monitor
in the grey
it.
zone.
The grey zone. Aberystwyth's in this amazing valley with Pendinas to your left and then Constitution Hill to your right, which we can't see Constitution Hill, but we can see the woods that we've just walked through. And there's that amazing 1960s looking Hollywood building.
It was interesting. I used to work down there many years ago. when I left university, I was in directory inquiries, yeah?
Yeah.
And I'd look out the window, that's down there, and I'm pointing over to the left.
Plus Krieg.
Yeah, so from there, pretty much, I lived there, and I'm pointing to the right. There's the hospital I was born.
Wow.
I worked there, and I looked out the
Wow.
window, and if you looked out from one side, I could see the school, Plus Krieg, where I was taught.
Wow.
And if you looked out the other window, you'd see the graveyard where I thought I was going to end up. So basically, birth was where I lived, that's where I got educated, that's where I worked, and that's where I was going to end up, 6 foot under. So it was all like in 1 square mile at the time. But I've moved just up the hill now to work just up there, so I'm a little bit further, and I live over there by the harbour, so you know I've extended a little bit.
Well,
I can see my house. Yeah. You know, I lived abroad for a little bit, and I've lived away, went away for university, but I've spent most of my life. It sneaks up on you because I've sort of realised now that will have spent my life really in Aberystwyth, but no regrets. I mean, I had kids. It's a brilliant place to bring up kids. I suppose, you know, you like to travel, I like to travel.
No, I don't like to travel.
Oh yeah, you always say that, but you have travelled.
do,
You're
I
lucky
have
enough
to.
to have. But, you know, it's the classic, it's cliche. I'd rather live here and go away and then come back here
Yeah.
than live somewhere else and then just visit and get to go to the sea or go for a walk like this.
Dr. Fletcher in 12 Monkeys.
Oh, right, I know who that was. Do you
Yeah.
recognise him?
Yeah,
Frank Gorshin,
yeah,
who was the Riddler in the 60s Batman.
yeah.
Well, okay, so put it all together. The theory was
Yeah,
all the things we talked about. It's not even a theory, it's just something I thought about. It's very timely, so good art is, isn't it?
yeah,
You know, Shakespeare,
yeah.
stuff about now, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, wow, you could put that play on now and it resonates with stuff that's going on at the moment, you know. So it's very timely. The mental health, the homelessness, the pandemic, the conspiracy theories, the elite in the film, you know, who want to get the cure, and everyone else living in cages. So there's tons of sort of timely stuff. It's, you know, it's a film, it's a time travel film where time travel doesn't really change anything at all, which is not what we're used to in a film with Bruce Willis
Yeah.
or Brad Pitt. And it's about he's trying to make the best of his life, even though he knows there's an upcoming disaster coming. He knows, doesn't he? He knows, like, in
Yeah.
a couple of weeks. So he's jumping into rivers and listening to pop songs and sort of just trying to make the most of it. But he doesn't change anything. And it sort of reminded me a bit of how the world's gone now a little bit, you know, all the challenges. We wake up and it's like, oh, choose your apocalypse, isn't
Yeah.
it? AI, climate,
Yeah.
global conflict, whatever. And again, it's almost like people are almost preparing, dare I say it, and we don't know yet. It's almost like people are, like James Cole is preparing. You know, people are preparing for a Trump victory, isn't it? And, you know, what we're going to do on the other side instead of trying to change things now. Well, we've still got 6 days. But that was a big thing, you know, unlike Terminator or Back to the Future or any of these films. It's a time travel film where
It never occurred to me.
time travel doesn't really have an impact.
The main impactful thing that happens is that Cole is killed at the end.
But then the whole thing starts again.
The whole
So
thing
you could look
starts
at it
again.
as positive, depressive. Do what you want because everything
Yeah.
is in a loop, is in a cycle. It's going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
So you know, so you can either, you can either look at it like, oh, this is terrible. Our whole lives are on rails. What's the point of anything? Or, well, our lives are on rails. So you may as well go for it
Yeah.
because of these just
Yeah.
loops and cycles, and you can't. You know, some people would look at it like you can't change anything, so that's terrible. And some people would say, oh, you can't change anything, so that's amazing.
Yeah.
So, you know, why not just go for it? Which is, and I hadn't thought of this, is what are they called? Yeah, the existentialists, isn't it? You know, there's Camus and
Yeah.
Sartre. You know, and James Cole is just trying to make the best of it.
And again, you know, back to kind of like the current mental illness really being this kind of sense of doom that a lot of us have. Trying to be a bit more kind of mindful is probably the way to be, and a bit more relaxed about things. You know, if we are on rails,
Well, you wake up
important that we
and
make the
you
most of
choose
it.
what's going to end the world, But, you know, we're still
But you
able to
can
go out on a
choose-
nice afternoon like this in the sun and have a laugh and enjoy ourselves and get on with it. Because actually, that, you know, something that Camus would say, that what makes us amazing and special is that we know all this
Yeah.
and we still get on with it,
Yeah,
don't we?
yeah,
We
yeah,
still
yeah.
have a crack at it.
Yeah.
I read something the other day, something like, oh, you know, we know everything but control nothing.
Thank you.